I was coming back from the Rideau Farmers Market when my phone rang. It was early October, one of those sharp Saturday mornings in Ottawa where the air smells like wood smoke and the maple trees along the street are doing that thing they do, going all red and gold at once like they're trying to outshine each other before the cold takes everything. I had 2 canvas bags full of butternut squash and a jar of local honey, and I was thinking about nothing in particular. Just the walk home, just the quiet, then the number on my screen. I didn't recognize it. A 613 area code, but not a contact. I almost didn't answer. Is this Sylvia Beaumont? A man's voice. Careful, like someone who'd been trained to deliver news slowly. I said yes. This is Constable Hargreaves, Ottawa Police. We have a young woman at the General. She's asking for you. Her name is... He said my daughter's name. He said Renée. The bags hit the sidewalk. I don't remember putting them down. They told me she'd been found near Merbleu, the wetland conservation area east of the city. A man walking his dog in the early morning had seen her on the path near the boardwalk, sitting against a tree, not moving. He'd thought at first she was sleeping. Then he got closer. She had a broken wrist, 2 cracked ribs, a deep gash above her left eye that had bled through her sweater collar. She was 7 months pregnant. When I walked into that hospital room and saw her, my Renée, my girl who used to make me laugh so hard I'd cry, who'd gotten her father's stubbornness in my mother's eyes, I had to grip the doorframe, just to stay standing. She looked at me, and her lip trembled, and she said, "Mammon, I'm so sorry." I crossed the room and held her as carefully as I could, and I said, "You have nothing to be sorry for. Nothing." It was only later, when the nurses had been and gone and the room was quiet and gray with afternoon light, that she told me her mother-in-law had done this. Her mother-in-law, Lorraine. I should tell you about Renée's marriage. I should tell you about Etienne. They'd met at Carleton University. He was in civil engineering. She was finishing her degree in social work. He was handsome in a quiet way, well-mannered, always brought wine when he came for dinner. His family was from the Eastern Townships originally, old Quebec money, the kind that doesn't talk about itself. His mother, Lorraine, ran a private property management company out of a glass office on Elgin Street. His father had passed years earlier. I had tried to like Lorraine. I genuinely had. But there was always something, a tightness around her eyes when she looked at Renée, a way she had of complimenting my daughter that somehow left a mark afterward. "Renée is so spirited," she'd say in a tone that meant something else entirely. When Renée and Etienne married, the wedding was at Lorraine's summer property near Wakefield. Beautiful place. During the reception, Lorraine pulled me aside near the garden and said, very pleasantly, that she hoped Renée understood the responsibility she was taking on. I smiled and said I thought they both did. Lorraine smiled back. We never said another real word to each other after that. Renée had told me things over the years. Little things. Lorraine questioning her parenting choices before the baby was even born. Lorraine making remarks about Renée's background. Her father had been a carpenter. We'd never had much, and Lorraine seemed to find that amusing in some quiet, private way. Once, at Christmas, Lorraine had said, within earshot of Renée, that she'd always assumed Etienne would marry someone more established. I'd told Renée to keep her distance. I'd told her Etienne needed to speak up. Etienne had not spoken up. Now, in the hospital room, Renée told me what had happened 2 nights before. There had been an argument at the house she and Etienne rented in Barhaven, the one Lorraine had helped finance the deposit on, a fact that came up often. Etienne had been away, a work conference in Calgary, and Lorraine had come over, unannounced as she sometimes did. The argument had started over the baby's name. Renée wanted to use her late grandmother's name. Lorraine had decided, apparently, that the child would be named for Etienne's grandmother instead. When Renée said no, when she said, quietly and firmly, that this was her child and her decision, and Lorraine was not invited to make it, something shifted in the older woman's face. Lorraine said some things that Renée repeated to me now in a flat, careful voice, like she was reading them off a page she didn't want to look at directly. that Renée had always been beneath Etienne, that women like her, women from nothing, women with no name, no history, didn't deserve the life they married into, that whatever happened to her, she brought it on herself. And then Lorraine had grabbed her by the arm. Renée had pulled back. She'd fallen against the kitchen island. Lorraine had not stopped. By the time Renée managed to get herself to her car and somehow drive with a broken wrist she didn't yet know was broken, to the parking lot near Mer Bleu, she'd been too shocked to call anyone. She'd sat there until she couldn't anymore. She'd been there all night. I sat very still while she talked. I held her hand. I did not let my face do what it wanted to do. When she finished, I said, "Where is Etienne now?" She said he was on his way back from Calgary. She said she hadn't called him. I said, "Has he called you?" She looked down at the blanket over her knees. That was my answer. "My brother Gerald." "No. My brother is named Gerald, but you already know I can't use that name here. My brother. Let me just call him what Renée has always called him. Uncle Lou. His name is Louis, but he's been Lou since we were kids in Gatineau, growing up in a small house on a street where everybody knew everybody. Lou is 63 years old. He retired 2 years ago from the OPP, Ontario Provincial Police, 30 years on the force. He lives now in a little house in Kemptville with his dog and his vegetable garden and more patience than anyone I've ever known. He is also the person I called from the hospital parking lot after I kissed Renée's forehead and told her I'd be right back. He picked up on the second ring. I told him everything. My voice didn't shake. I'm 64 years old and I've had a long time to learn how to say hard things clearly. Lou was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'll make some calls." I said, "Not yet. First I need you here." He was at the hospital in 40 minutes. Etienne arrived that evening. He came into the room looking pale and undone, tie loose, carry-on still in his hand. He went to Renée immediately, and I watched him hold her, and I watched his face, and I made myself look, really look, to see what was there. There was grief. There was genuine grief, but underneath it, something careful, something that was already calculating. He looked over Renée's shoulder at me, and I held his gaze for a long moment. "Sylvia," he said, "I'm so sorry, I didn't know." "I know you didn't," I said. Lou was sitting in the chair by the window. Etienne noticed him, and something moved across his face. Recognition, maybe, or the awareness of what Lou's presence meant. "I want to press charges," Renée said from the pillow. Her voice was quiet, but it had no wavering in it. "I want her charged." Etienne's jaw moved. "Renée, she's my mother." "She broke my wrist?" Renée said. "I'm 7 months pregnant and she broke my wrist." The room was very quiet. Lou said from the window without looking up from his phone. "Assault causing bodily harm. Could also pursue mischief, endangering life, given the pregnancy. Crown attorney will have options." Etienne looked at him. "You're not. This is a family matter." "No," I said. "It stopped being a family matter when she put her hands on my daughter." Lorraine was charged 4 days later. Lou had spoken with the investigating officers, carefully, properly, making clear he was acting as a family member and not in any official capacity, but also making absolutely clear that the family intended to pursue every available avenue. The officer in charge, a woman named Constable Tremblay, was professional and thorough. She took Renée's statement at the hospital. She noted the injuries carefully. The charge was assault causing bodily harm. Given Renée's pregnancy, the Crown added an additional count. Lorraine's lawyer, of course, was expensive. He had an office on O'Connor Street and a name that appeared on charitable gala programs. He released a brief statement saying his client was deeply distressed by the situation and was cooperating fully. What that meant in practice was that Lorraine told police Renée had slipped, that it had been an accident, that she'd only been trying to help. I read that statement on my laptop at my kitchen table in my house in Hittenberg, with a cup of tea going cold beside me, and I felt something settle in my chest like a stone dropping into still water. Not anger. I'd moved through anger in that hospital parking lot. What I felt now was clarity. She was going to make Renée tell the story again, in front of lawyers, in front of a judge. She was going to make her daughter-in-law, 7 months pregnant with broken ribs and a broken wrist, stand up and prove it. Fine. Then we would stand up and prove it. What Lorraine didn't know, what Etienne didn't know, was that Renée had a habit I'd always lightly teased her about. She kept a journal. Not a paper one. A voice memo app on her phone. She'd record little observations, reminders to herself, thoughts she didn't want to lose. She'd been doing it since university. She had 18 months of recordings. Some of them were nothing. Grocery lists, reminders to schedule a dentist appointment. But some of them were something else. Renée talking to herself, quietly, after visits with Lorraine, describing what had been said, how it had felt. There was one from the previous Christmas that made Lou go very still when he listened to it. Renée had recorded herself in the car on the drive home, voice shaky but clear, repeating almost word for word what Lorraine had said about her background, her family, her being beneath Etienne. She'd recorded it because she'd needed to say it out loud, because she'd needed to hear how wrong it was. Her lawyer, a woman named Priya Chandrasekhar, family law specialist with a firm in Central Town, someone Lou knew professionally and trusted completely, said those recordings were significant. Not definitive, but significant. Context for a pattern. Pattern. That word matters in Canadian law when it comes to domestic situations. It matters to Crown attorneys. It matters to judges. Priya filed a civil claim alongside the criminal proceedings. Property dispute. Lorraine's name had been on some paperwork related to the Barhaven house, and she'd been making noise about that. Priya handled it like she handled everything, precisely and without visible effort. Meanwhile, there was the matter of Etienne. He had, in the weeks after the assault, tried to occupy a kind of middle position. He'd moved into his mother's condo temporarily, he said, to support her through the legal process. He called Renée every day, and I know because Renée told me, and Renée does not lie to me. She still loved him. She was still hoping. I didn't tell her what I thought. She didn't need that from me. She needed to hold her hand over her belly and feel the baby kick and know that she was going to be okay regardless of what he decided. But I had one conversation with Etienne. One. He came to my house in Hintonburg on a Sunday afternoon, alone, and sat across from me at my kitchen table. He looked like he hadn't been sleeping. I said, I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer me honestly. He said yes. I said, did you know? Not about that night. I believe you didn't know about that night. But the rest of it, the way she spoke to Renée. Did you know? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I told myself it wasn't that bad. I nodded. I said, that's what I thought. I poured him tea. I didn't tell him what to do. He was a grown man and it wasn't my place. But I looked at him steadily and I said, your daughter is going to be born in 8 weeks. She's going to look up at you. I'd think about what you want her to see when she does. He left without saying much. I didn't know what he'd do. The baby came on a Wednesday evening in late November, which in Ottawa means the city was already gray and cold, and the hospital windows had that particular winter condensation on them. She was 6 pounds 11 ounces. She had Renée's nose and, honestly, much as I hate to admit it, something of Etienne's around the forehead. Renée named her Margot, after her grandmother. I held that baby in the delivery room while the nurses were still moving around and the monitors were beeping quietly, and Renée was lying back with her eyes closed, finally resting, finally safe. And I just stood there by the window with this small, warm, indignant creature in my arms. And I thought, this is what we were protecting, this right here. Etienne was there. He'd been in the waiting room for 9 hours. When they brought him in, he went straight to Renée. And whatever happened between them in the next few minutes was theirs and not mine. So I stepped out into the hallway with Lou, who was waiting on the bench outside with terrible coffee from the vending machine and that steady, quiet presence he's always had. She's beautiful, I said. Lou smiled. Of course she is. She's Renée's. Lorraine's case went through the system over the following months. The criminal proceedings moved at the pace they always do, slowly, with delays, with continuances. The trial date was set for the following spring. I won't pretend it was easy, waiting. Watching Renée have to revisit it all, answer questions, sit across a boardroom table from Lorraine's expensive lawyer. But the recordings were admitted. 18 months of Renée's voice, careful and hurt and clear. The Christmas recording in particular, the one where you could hear her trying not to cry in the car, repeating what Lorraine had said. The Crown attorney used it to establish pattern. The judge, a quiet woman in her 50s with reading glasses she kept taking off and putting back on, found Lorraine guilty on the primary assault charge. There was a conviction. Lorraine received a conditional sentence. No jail time, but strict conditions, probation, mandatory counseling. Her lawyer said it was a lenient outcome. Priya said it was a starting point. In the civil proceedings, Lorraine lost her claim on the Barhaven property. That was clean, and that was clear. She did not attend Margot's christening. She was not invited. Etienne moved back in when Margot was 3 months old. I don't know exactly what passed between him and Renée during those weeks. I know there were long conversations, and I know Renée called me one night at 11 o'clock, and we talked for 2 hours, and I know she made her own decision with her own eyes open. I respected that. I still do. He cut contact with Lorraine, his choice, his timeline, his grief, because it is grief, losing a parent, even if that parent has done terrible things. I'm not without sympathy for the complicated parts of that. What I know is that Etienne comes for Sunday dinner now. He sits at my kitchen table in Hindenburg, and he passes the bread and he holds Margot against his chest while she grabs at his collar. And last month he stayed late to help me fix the front porch railing that's been loose since August. Lou was here that evening too, and the three of them, Renée, Etienne, Lou, sat on the porch steps after with coffee while the streetlights came on, and I watched them from the kitchen window, and I thought about all the ways a family can almost break and then hold. I want to say something to you, and I want to say it plainly because I'm 64 years old and I don't have time for anything but plain. If you're sitting somewhere watching this and you have a daughter-in-law, or a daughter, or a son, or anyone you love who has been made to feel small by the people around them, made to feel they aren't enough, made to feel that whatever happens to them is somehow what they deserve, I want you to hear this. Document everything. Voice memos, texts, emails, dates, and times written in a notebook. Everything. Not because you're planning for war, but because if the day comes when you need to stand up and prove what happened, you'll want something solid in your hands. And if that day comes anyway, if everything goes wrong despite all the hoping and the managing and the keeping the peace, find one person you trust absolutely and call them. You don't need a crowd. You need one Lou. The rest, you handle together. Renée brought Margot to the market with me last Saturday, the same Rideau market where I was standing when the phone rang back in October. Margot was in the carrier on Renée's chest, round-faced and serious, looking at the world like she was already taking notes on it. The maple sugar vendor gave her a tiny sample on a spoon, and she made a face like it was the strangest and best thing that had ever happened to her. I stood there and I watched my daughter laugh, really laugh from her whole chest, and I thought, there it is. There's the thing they were trying to take. They didn't get it. We made sure of that. I've been thinking about something Lou said to me, weeks after the trial. We were sitting on my back porch in Hindenburg with the last of the autumn light coming through the neighbor's oak tree, and he said, "You know what the hardest part of 30 years on the job was? Watching people wait too long to speak up, because they thought staying quiet was the same thing as keeping the peace." He wasn't wrong, and I say that as someone who spent a long time believing that if you were just patient enough, careful enough, polite enough, things would eventually correct themselves. I believed that managing a difficult situation gracefully was a form of strength. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's just fear with better posture. What happened to Renée didn't happen in a single night. It happened over years of small moments. A remark left unchallenged, a slight absorbed and set aside, a pattern that everyone in the room could see but no one named out loud. Lorraine didn't become the kind of person who hurts a pregnant woman in one afternoon. She became that person gradually, in a house full of people who loved Etienne more than they wanted to confront what his mother was. Including, I'll say it plainly, me. I should have said more, sooner. That's my part in it, and I sit with it. What I know now, what that whole terrible season taught me, is that cruelty depends on silence, the way a fire depends on oxygen. It needs people to look away. It needs the people who love the victim to keep choosing comfort over truth. The moment we stopped doing that, the moment Renée spoke, the moment I called Lou, the moment Priya filed those papers, everything changed. Not because justice is automatic or guaranteed. It isn't. But because the silence broke. And once the silence breaks, the people doing harm suddenly have to reckon with what they've actually done, in the light where everyone can see it. Renée kept those voice memos for 18 months without really knowing why. She just needed to say the things out loud that she wasn't allowed to say in that house. She was documenting her own pain almost by instinct. The same instinct, I think, that makes people write in journals or call their mothers late at night. The instinct that says, this is real and I need someone to witness it, even if that someone is only me. That instinct saved her in a courtroom. That small, private act of self-respect became the most important piece of evidence in the case. There's something in that worth holding on to. When you're in the middle of something that feels wrong, when someone is making you feel small and you keep finding reasons to excuse them, pay attention to that feeling. Write it down, say it out loud. You don't have to act on it immediately. But don't let it dissolve. Don't let it become just another thing you told yourself wasn't that bad. Margot is 7 months old now. She has figured out how to bang both hands on the high chair tray simultaneously, which she finds enormously satisfying. Last Sunday, Etienne held her up to see the snow falling outside the kitchen window, and she pressed her palm flat against the glass like she was trying to touch it. Renée was standing next to me at the counter and she laughed, that whole chest laugh of hers, and I thought, there is the life that almost got taken. There it is, right in this kitchen, completely ordinary and completely irreplaceable. That's what we were protecting. That's what was worth every hard conversation, every court date, every sleepless night. Not revenge, I want to be clear about that. Accountability. There's a difference. Revenge is about making someone else feel the pain. Accountability is about making sure the harm stops. It's about standing in the light and saying, this happened, it was wrong, and we are not going to pretend otherwise. We didn't get everything we wanted from the legal process. I don't think anyone ever does, but we got enough. We got the truth told, out loud, in a room with a judge, and we got Margot sleeping in her crib down the hall safe. That's enough. That is more than enough.